Jake Morrison walked through the grand halls of the Galactic Council building one last time. His boots made soft clicking sounds on the polished floor. The massive windows showed the bright stars of the galaxy's center, but Jake barely looked at them. He had seen this view for 15 years, and today would be his last. The human captain carried a small box with his personal items. Inside were photos of his family back on Earth, a coffee mug that said, "World's Best Dad," and a small flag from his home state of Texas. These simple things felt more important than all the fancy alien technology around him. Amy Foster walked beside him, her own box tucked under her arm. She had been Jake's second in command for 8 years. Together, they had fought countless battles in the council chambers, not with weapons, but with words. They had argued for human rights, for better treatment, for a fair chance to prove what humanity could do. "Remember when we first got here?" Amy asked as they passed the main assembly hall. "We thought we could change everything in a few years." Jake smiled sadly. "We were so young and stupid. We actually believed they would listen to us." The council building buzzed with activity. Aliens of all shapes and sizes hurried past them, busy with their important work. Most didn't even notice the two humans leaving. After all, humans were just the newest members of the council, the ones who had to sit in the back and wait their turn to speak. The Zithari looked like tall, thin birds with silver feathers and sharp beaks. They controlled most of the council's legal system. Whenever Jake had tried to propose new laws to help humanity, the Zithari would shake their heads and talk about proper procedures and following the old ways. The Krillian representatives were even worse. They looked like giant armored beetles and spoke in clicking sounds that the translation machines turned into boring speeches about maintaining order and knowing your place. To them, humans were just another species that needed to learn respect. For their betters, Jake and Amy had spent 15 years listening to these aliens. They had followed every rule, filled out every form, and waited patiently for their turn to speak. When they finally got the chance, the aliens would nod politely and then ignore everything they said. "Did you upload the final reports?" Jake asked. As they reached the main lobby, "All done," Amy replied. "Every piece of research, every technical manual, every improvement we made to their systems, it's all in their databases now." "Good, let them figure out how to use it without us." They walked past the information desk where a blue-skinned alien looked up from his computer screen. "Leaving early today?" he asked in friendly tones. "Leaving for good," Jake said simply. The alien's face changed. "What do you mean?" "Humanity is withdrawing from the council. We're done here." The alien stared at them with wide eyes. But you can't just leave. There are procedures, forms to fill out, committees to consult." Amy pulled out a data pad and handed it to him. "All done. Official withdrawal papers, signed by our government. We're out." They walked through the main doors into the busy street. Outside, the council city was full of aliens from hundreds of different worlds. Street vendors sold strange foods while hover cars carried important officials to their meetings. It was an amazing sight, but Jake felt nothing but relief to be leaving it behind. "Think they'll miss us?" Amy asked as they climbed into their shuttle. "They'll miss what we did for them," Jake said. "They just don't know it yet." The shuttle lifted off and headed toward the human quarter of the city. Down below, Jake could see the research centers where human scientists had worked day and night to solve problems that had puzzled alien minds for centuries. Dr. Lisa Warren had invented a new type of medicine that could cure diseases across different species. Her team had shared their knowledge freely, hoping to save lives throughout the galaxy. But when Lisa had asked for funding to expand her research, the council had told her to wait. There were more important projects to fund first. Projects run by older, more respected species. The shuttle passed over the trade district where human merchants had built bridges between alien cultures that had never learned to work together. Nick Palmer had spent years learning different alien languages and customs. He could negotiate deals between species that had been enemies for centuries, but when Nick had asked for humanity to have a voice in trade decisions, the council had smiled and said that humans were too new to understand the complexities of galactic commerce. They flew past the communication center, where human engineers had quietly improved the systems that kept the galaxy connected. The old alien networks had been slow and unreliable. Human technicians had fixed them, upgraded them, and made them work better than ever before. But when the humans had suggested that they deserved recognition for their work, the council had reminded them that they were guests here, not partners. "Look at that," Amy said, pointing down at the spaceport. "The cargo ships are already backing up." Jake looked down to see dozens of ships waiting in line. Without human traffic controllers managing the flow, the efficient system was already starting to break down. The humans had been running the spaceport for the past 5 years, turning it from a chaotic mess into a smooth operation. "Give it a week," Jake said. "They'll figure out how much we actually did around here." The shuttle landed at the human compound, a small cluster of buildings that had been humanity's home in the council city. Other humans were already loading their belongings into transport ships. Families carried boxes and suitcases, children held onto their favorite toys, and everyone moved with quiet determination. Carl Bennett stood near the communication center, shutting down the networks that had connected human colonies across the galaxy. His fingers moved quickly over the controls, severing links that had taken years to build. "How long until we're completely dark?" Jake asked him. 3 hours, Carl replied. "Every human signal will be cut off from the council systems. They won't be able to track us or contact us." "Good, we're done being their servants." Susan Miller looked up from her own console. "The information networks are going offline now. No more human-maintained relay stations for the council to use." Jake watched the status lights on the wall turn from green to red one by one. Each light represented a connection to the wider galaxy, a bridge that humans had built and maintained. "Soon all the lights would be dark. Are you sure about this?" Amy asked quietly. "Once we leave, there's no going back." Jake thought about all the years he had spent in council meetings, listening to aliens tell him why humanity wasn't ready for real responsibility. He thought about the young human engineers who had been passed over for promotion because they belonged to the wrong species. He thought about the human colonies that had been denied resources because they weren't considered important enough. "I'm sure," he said. "We gave them 15 years to treat us as equals. They chose to keep us as servants instead. That's their choice, and this is ours." The last transport ship lifted off from the compound as the sun set over the council city. Jake watched from the window as the lights of the city came on below them. Somewhere down there, aliens were probably just starting to notice that their human colleagues hadn't shown up for work. Tomorrow, they would discover that the humans weren't coming back. Jake settled back in his seat and closed his eyes. After 15 years of fighting for respect, he was finally going home. Not to Earth, but to the new worlds that humanity had been secretly building. Far from the Council's control, the galaxy was about to learn what it meant to lose something it had never bothered to value. 3 months had passed since the humans left, and engineer Zixthara stared at her computer screen with growing panic. The numbers made no sense. The power plants on 7 different worlds were failing, and she couldn't figure out why. The tall, bird-like Zithari had been running power systems for over 200 years. She knew every circuit, every control system, every safety protocol, but these new problems were beyond her understanding. "Run the diagnostic again," she told her assistant, a young Krillian named Klex, who clicked his mandibles nervously. "I've run it 15 times already," Klex replied. "The systems say everything is working perfectly, but the power output keeps dropping." Zixthara pulled up the maintenance records. For the past 8 years, human technicians had been making small improvements to the power plants. They called them efficiency upgrades and claimed they could increase power output by 30%. The council engineers had been skeptical at first, but the improvements worked exactly as promised. The problem was that nobody had bothered to learn how the human modifications actually worked. The humans had always handled the maintenance themselves, flying out to the power plants whenever something needed attention. They had been so reliable that the council engineers had stopped paying attention to the technical details. Contact the human technical support team, Zixthara ordered. I tried, Kleck said quietly. Their communication channels are all dead, no response to any of our signals. Zixthara felt a cold chill run down her spine. Without the humans to maintain their improvements, the power plants were slowly breaking down. And without those power plants, entire worlds would go dark. Meanwhile, on the agricultural world of Verdania, Trade Minister Grolvex was facing his own crisis. The massive Hesperian looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard, with thick scales and powerful claws. He had been managing galactic food distribution for 50 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The crop yields are down 40% across all sectors, his aide reported. If this continues, we'll have food shortages on 12 worlds by next season. Grolvex studied the reports with growing alarm. The agricultural worlds had been using human-developed farming techniques for the past decade. The humans had introduced new fertilizers, better irrigation systems, and crops that could grow in harsh conditions. The food production had increased so much that the Council had been able to support billions of new colonists. What about the human agricultural advisors? Grolvex asked. Can we contact them? They're gone, sir. All of them left the same day as the diplomatic team. Grolvex slammed his massive fist on the desk. How are we supposed to maintain their systems without them? We're trying to reverse engineer their methods, the aide said nervously. But it's complicated. The humans integrated their techniques with local ecosystems in ways we don't fully understand. On the trading station orbiting Nexus Prime, Communications Officer Beth Collins had been gone for 3 months, but her absence was felt every day. The human woman had been responsible for managing the complex translation protocols that allowed dozens of different species to communicate with each other. Station Commander Vexara, a blue-skinned Altarian, watched helplessly as another trade negotiation fell apart. The thermal merchants couldn't understand the Krillian contract terms, and the Krillian negotiators were insulted by what they saw as thermal rudeness. Where's the human translator? The thermal representative demanded. The humans are no longer with us, Vexara replied diplomatically. Then get another one. We can't do business without proper communication. But there were no other human translators available. Beth Collins had been the only human fluent in both thermal and Krillian languages. She had spent years learning the subtle cultural differences that made trade between the two species possible. Without her, the lucrative trade route between the thermal worlds and the Krillian Empire was effectively dead. 17 other trade routes were facing similar problems. As species that had never learned to work together directly found themselves unable to communicate. Dr. Carl Bennett sat in his new office on the human colony world of New Haven, monitoring the galactic communication networks. The bearded scientist had been responsible for maintaining the relay stations that kept the galaxy connected, and he could see the system slowly falling apart. The outer rim stations are going offline one by one, he reported to his colleague. Susan Miller. Without regular maintenance, they'll all be dead within 6 months. Susan looked up from her own console. The Council hasn't even tried to contact us for help. They probably think they can fix it themselves. Carl laughed bitterly. They have no idea how complex the network really is. We spent 15 years building redundancies and backup systems. They see the main stations, but they don't understand the thousands of smaller relays that keep everything connected. The human-maintained network had been invisible to most Council members. They saw the big relay stations on major worlds, but they missed the countless smaller installations that humans had built throughout the galaxy. These tiny stations filled in the gaps, ensuring that even remote colonies could stay in touch with the rest of civilization. As the small stations failed without maintenance, entire sectors were becoming isolated. Colony worlds that had been in constant contact with their home governments suddenly found themselves cut off from the outside universe. On the medical station orbiting Helix 7, Dr. Paula Martinez had been gone for 3 months, but her absence was killing people. The human doctor had developed a universal blood synthesis technology that could create compatible blood for any species in the galaxy. The technology had seemed simple enough, Patients would come in, the machines would analyze their blood chemistry, and synthetic blood would be produced in minutes. It had saved millions of lives over the past 5 years, treating everything from accident victims to rare genetic disorders, but the machines were starting to malfunction. The delicate sensors that analyzed alien blood chemistry were drifting out of calibration. The synthesis protocols were producing blood that was close to what patients needed, but not quite right. Dr. Keth Vora, the station's chief medical officer, watched helplessly as patients who should have been easy to treat started dying. The thermal patient in room 7 needed a blood transfusion, but the synthetic blood was causing severe reactions. The Krillian in room 12 was rejecting the artificial platelets that should have stopped his bleeding. "Can't we recalibrate the machines?" asked Nurse Valandra. "We've tried," Kethvera replied. "Dr. Martinez's calibration protocols are far more complex than we realized." She was making hundreds of tiny adjustments that we never documented. The human doctor had worked with an intuitive understanding of alien biochemistry that had taken her years to develop. She could look at a patient's blood work and immediately know what adjustments to make to the synthesis protocols. Without her expertise, the life-saving technology was becoming useless. Admiral Danny Rodriguez stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the Council fleet's training exercises through long-range sensors. The human officer had been exiled, along with the rest of his species, but he couldn't help feeling concerned about what he was seeing. "Their formation patterns are sloppy," commented Captain Billy Nelson, his tactical officer. "They're not coordinating their defensive screens properly." Danny nodded grimly. For the past 8 years, human officers had been quietly integrated into the Council's military command structure. They had introduced new tactical doctrines, improved communication protocols, and developed defensive strategies that had made the Council fleet the most effective fighting force in the galaxy, but the Council had never recognized the human contribution. They saw human officers as junior partners, useful for handling minor details, while the senior alien commanders made the real decisions. They didn't realize that those minor details were what made their fleet actually work. "Their shield harmonics are all wrong," Billy continued. "Without proper coordination, a single enemy squadron could punch right through their defenses." Danny watched as a Council destroyer nearly collided with a frigate during a simple flanking maneuver. The human-developed coordination protocols had made such accidents impossible, but the alien crews had already forgotten how to implement them properly. "Should we warn them?" Billy asked. "They made their choice," Danny replied. "They wanted to run their own military without human interference. Let them learn the hard way." On the industrial world of Mechanica, the factory managers were discovering that human efficiency wasn't just about working harder. Sandy Williams had been their production coordinator for 6 years, and in that time she had revolutionized their manufacturing processes. The human woman had introduced concepts that seemed obvious in retrospect: preventive maintenance schedules, quality control checkpoints, and workflow optimization. The factories had been running at peak efficiency for years, producing more goods with less waste than ever before. But Sandy's improvements had been more than just new procedures. She had understood the interconnected nature of the manufacturing process in ways that the alien managers never grasped. She knew which machines needed attention before they broke down, which workers were best suited for different tasks. Ambassador Kethmer stood in the center of the Council chamber as emergency lights flashed red around him. The elegant Altarian diplomat had served the Council for over a century, but he had never seen the ruling body in such panic. 6 months, Chairman Vorthik announced to the assembled delegates. 6 months since the humans left, and half our systems are failing. We need to find them and negotiate their return. The massive chamber buzzed with nervous chatter. Representatives from dozens of species filled the curved seating rows, their different languages creating a chaos of sound that the translation system struggled to handle. Without human technicians maintaining the communication networks, even the translators were starting to glitch. "I volunteer for the mission," Kethmer said, his voice cutting through the noise. "I've worked with humans before. I understand their psychology. This was partly true. Kethmer had attended diplomatic dinners with human representatives and had always found them refreshingly direct compared to other species. But like most council members, he had never really listened to what the humans were trying to tell them. "Take whatever ships you need," Vorthik replied. "Find them. Bring them back." 2 days later, Kethmer's diplomatic vessel approached the coordinates of New Terra, humanity's former capital world. The planet looked exactly as it had 6 months ago. Blue oceans, green continents, and the glittering lights of major cities visible from orbit. "Scanning for human life signs," reported his pilot, a young Zithari named Chixara. "Negative contact," came the reply moments later. "No human signatures detected anywhere on the planet." Kethmer felt a chill run through his blue-tinged skin. "Are you certain? Scan again." "I've run the scan 3 times, Ambassador. The planet is empty of human life." They landed at the spaceport of New Terra's capital city. The facility was pristine, with automated systems still directing phantom traffic, and maintenance robots keeping the runways clean. But there wasn't a single human to be seen. Kethmer walked through the empty terminal, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Shops stood ready for customers who would never come. Information screens displayed schedules for flights that would never depart. The whole place felt like a museum of a civilization that had simply vanished. "This is impossible," Chixara whispered. "Where did they all go?" They took a hover car into the city center. The streets were empty but perfectly maintained. Traffic lights still functioned, following programmed patterns for non-existent vehicles. Street cleaners rolled along their routes, sweeping up leaves that no one was there to see. In the government district, they found the Human Council building. The doors were unlocked and the lights turned on automatically as they entered. Everything was exactly as it had been left. Files organized in drawers. Computers shut down properly, even coffee cups washed and put away. Kethmer walked through the empty offices, looking for any clue about where the humans had gone. In what had been the president's office, he found a single note on the desk. "Building secured. All personnel relocated per Plan Omega. Karen Thompson, Evacuation Director." "Plan Omega?" Chixara asked, reading over his shoulder. "I've never heard of it," Kethmer admitted. "But it sounds like they were planning this for a long time." They spent 3 days on New Terra, searching through government buildings, residential areas, and industrial complexes. Everywhere they looked, they found the same thing: perfectly preserved human civilization, but no humans. It was as if an entire species had simply decided to disappear. The investigation led them to other human worlds. New Boston, New Sydney, New Cairo, all empty. Each planet showed the same pattern: no destruction, no signs of panic, just careful, methodical evacuation. The humans had left behind fully functional societies, but taken every single person with them. "The precision is incredible," Chixara observed as they examined evacuation records on New Boston. "They moved 43 million people off this world without leaving a trace of where they went." Kethmer studied the shipping manifests they had found. "Look at these dates. They started moving people and equipment 2 years ago." This wasn't a sudden decision, it was a long-term plan. The evidence painted a disturbing picture. While human diplomats were still attending council meetings and human workers were still maintaining galactic infrastructure, their governments had been quietly preparing for complete withdrawal. Supply ships had been rerouted, personnel had been gradually transferred to unknown locations, and entire industries had been dismantled and moved. Captain Danny Rodriguez had been right when he told his council contacts that humans were exploring new opportunities. What he hadn't mentioned was that these opportunities were in star systems that the council had never bothered to map. "Sir," Chixara called from another terminal, "I found something interesting in the banking records." Kethmer hurried over to look at the screen. The financial records showed a systematic closure of all human accounts with galactic banks. Over the course of 2 years, humans had quietly withdrawn their money, canceled their contracts, and severed their economic ties with the rest of the galaxy. They were financially independent, Kethmer realized. They didn't need our economic system anymore. The more they investigated, the more sophisticated the human withdrawal appeared. Dr. Lisa Warren had not only removed her research from council databases, she had been secretly developing new technologies that the council had never seen. The medical breakthroughs she had shared were apparently just the beginning of what human science could achieve. "Look at this," Chixara said, pointing to a research manifest. They moved 17 entire research stations to unknown locations. Stations we never even knew existed. Kethmore felt a growing sense of unease. The humans hadn't just left the council, they had been building a completely separate civilization while pretending to be loyal members of the galactic community. They had been preparing for independence for years. The trail led to the outer rim territories where human survey ships had been exploring uncharted systems. The official records showed routine scientific missions, but the shipping manifests told a different story. The survey ships had been carrying colonists, equipment, and supplies far beyond the borders of council space. They found new worlds, Kethmore said quietly, worlds we don't even know about. In the abandoned offices of the Human Survey Division, they found star charts that had been deliberately corrupted. The navigation data for dozens of systems had been scrambled, making it impossible to determine where the human survey teams had actually been working. Rachel Morgan, the human intelligence analyst, had been thorough in covering their tracks. Every piece of evidence that might lead to the new human colonies had been carefully destroyed or altered. The humans had vanished into unexplored space, leaving no trail for anyone to follow. "We need to expand the search," Kethmore decided. "Send word to all council patrol ships. Look for any signs of human activity in unclaimed systems." But the search proved futile. The galaxy was vast, and the humans had apparently chosen their new homes well. Council ships found nothing but empty space and uninhabited worlds. If human colonies existed in the outer rim, they were either too well hidden or too far away to locate. Months passed without any sign of the missing humans. The Council's best intelligence officers found no trace of human communications, no evidence of human ships, no indication of where 43 billion people had gone. It was as if humanity had simply stepped out of the galaxy and closed the door behind them. The few clues they did find only made the mystery deeper. Long-range sensors detected faint energy signatures in distant star systems, but by the time Council ships arrived to investigate, there was nothing to see. If humans were responsible for the signals, they were staying well ahead of any pursuit. "They're out there," Kethmore reported to the Council. "But they don't want to be found." The investigation had taken 8 months, and the Council was no closer to finding the humans than when they had started. Meanwhile, the galactic economy continued to collapse. Infrastructure continued to fail, and member species continued to blame the Council for losing humanity in the first place. "What do we do now?" Chairman Vorthik asked during an emergency session. Kethmore looked around the chamber at the desperate faces of his fellow council members. "We wait," he said finally. "And we hope that someday they'll decide to talk to U.S." But even as he spoke, Kethmore suspected that the humans were already talking, just not to the Council. Intelligence reports suggested that independent colonies and trading stations were receiving visits from mysterious ships that matched no known species designs. The humans weren't hiding from everyone, it seemed. They were just hiding from the Council. The galaxy was changing, and the Council was no longer in control of that change. Somewhere out in the vast darkness of space, humanity was building something new. Something that didn't need the Council's permission or approval. The question was, what would they do with it? 1 year had passed since the humans disappeared, and the galaxy was dying. Not literally, but the civilization that had flourished for thousands of years was crumbling piece by piece. Guildmaster Trokvan of the Vorthen Mining Consortium stared at the production reports with despair written across his rocky features. 60%, he growled to his assistant. "Our extraction rates have dropped to 60% of what they were last year." The massive stone like Vorthen had been mining asteroids for over 3 centuries. His people were known throughout the galaxy as the best miners, able to extract precious metals from the hardest rock. But even they couldn't solve the problems that had started after the humans left. The extraction equipment keeps breaking down. His assistant reported nervously. The human-designed drilling systems are too complex for our repair teams. Trokvan slammed his fist on the desk, creating a small crater in the metal surface. The humans had introduced new mining techniques 5 years ago. Their machines could dig deeper, extract more ore, and process materials faster than traditional Vorthan equipment. The improved efficiency had made the mining guild incredibly wealthy, but the human engineers who designed the systems had also been the only ones who knew how to fix them. When the machines broke down, human repair teams would arrive within days to get everything working again. Now those repair teams were gone, and the advanced equipment was turning into expensive scrap metal. "What about the instruction manuals?" Trokvan asked. "We have them, but they're written in human technical language. Our best engineers can't understand half of what they say." The mining guild wasn't alone in their struggles. Across the galaxy, industries that had relied on human innovation were grinding to a halt. The humans had shared their knowledge freely, but they had never trained other species to maintain their improvements. Dr. Pela Martinez watched the news reports from her new laboratory on the human colony world of Haven's Rest. The middle-aged doctor sat in her comfortable chair, sipping coffee from her favorite mug while alien news anchors described the medical crisis spreading across council space. "The death toll continues to rise," the Zithari news anchor reported. "Medical facilities throughout the galaxy are struggling to treat patients without access to human-developed therapies." Paula shook her head sadly. She had spent 15 years developing treatments that could save lives across dozens of different species. Her universal blood synthesis technology alone had prevented millions of deaths. Her work on cross-species organ transplants had given hope to patients who had no other options, but the Council had never appreciated her efforts. When she had requested funding for expanded research, they had told her that human medicine was interesting but not essential. They had treated her life-saving work as a hobby project that they could take or leave. Now they were learning what essential really meant. Without Paula's expertise, the medical technology was breaking down. Patients who should have lived were dying because the machines couldn't be properly calibrated. Diseases that had been easily treatable were becoming deadly again. Dr. Martinez. Her assistant called from the next room. "There's an emergency transmission from the Council Medical Authority. They're requesting immediate assistance with a plague outbreak on Therma Prime." Paula considered the request for a moment. Part of her wanted to help. She had become a doctor to save lives, not to watch people suffer. But she also remembered all the times the Council had dismissed her research, all the funding requests they had denied, all the times they had made it clear that human contributions weren't really valued. "Send them our standard response," she said finally. "The human medical authority is not currently providing services to Council worlds." Billy Nelson stood on the bridge of the human defense ship Liberty, watching long-range sensors track a Council fleet exercise. The former tactical officer had been instrumental in developing the defensive strategies that had made the Council fleet nearly invincible. Now he could see those same strategies falling apart without proper implementation. "Look at that mess," commented Captain Steve Wilson, shaking his head as he studied the tactical display. "They're not maintaining proper shield harmonics. A single torpedo spread could punch right through their formation." Billy nodded grimly. The Council fleet was trying to perform maneuvers that required precise coordination between multiple ships. The defensive screens needed to overlap perfectly, creating layers of protection that could stop almost any attack. But the alien crews had forgotten the subtle timing adjustments that made the system work. "Their communication protocols are wrong too," Billy observed. "They're using the old command structure instead of the distributed network we developed." The human-designed military improvements had been more than just new technology. They had introduced concepts of flexible command, rapid response, and adaptive tactics that had revolutionized space combat. The Council fleet had become the most effective fighting force in the galaxy by following human military doctrine, but doctrine was more than just following orders. It required understanding the principles behind the tactics. The alien officers had memorized the procedures without grasping the reasons, and now they were falling back on their old, less effective methods. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a distress signal from a council patrol ship. They're under attack by raiders and requesting assistance." Billy looked at the tactical display. The council ship was badly outgunned and would likely be destroyed if no one helped them. A year ago, he would have immediately ordered a rescue mission, but those days were over. "We're not in council space," he said firmly. "Not our jurisdiction. Not our responsibility." On the agricultural world of New Harvest, farmer Alan Brown watched his crops grow in neat, orderly rows. The human colony was thriving, with food production that exceeded even their optimistic projections. Meanwhile, his former colleagues at the Galactic Agricultural Authority were struggling to feed their own populations. "The news feeds are getting worse," his wife Linda commented as she joined him in the fields. "Food shortages on 12 worlds. Now they're talking about rationing." Alan remembered the years he had spent teaching alien farmers how to improve their crop yields. He had developed techniques for growing food in harsh environments, created new fertilizers that worked with different soil types, and introduced crop rotation methods that could increase production by 50%. The alien farmers had been grateful for his help, but their governments had never seen agriculture as important. Food production was considered a low-skill job that didn't require advanced education or significant investment. The council had been happy to use human improvements, but they had never bothered to fund agricultural research or training programs. Now, the improved farming techniques were failing without proper maintenance. The alien farmers knew how to plant the enhanced crops, but they didn't understand the complex ecosystem management that made the improvements sustainable. Soil nutrients were becoming depleted, pest populations were exploding, and crop diseases were spreading unchecked. "Should we offer to help?" Linda asked quietly. Alan thought about all the times he had submitted proposals for agricultural education programs, only to have them rejected as unnecessary expenditures. He remembered the council representatives who had politely thanked him for his contributions while making it clear that human expertise wasn't really needed. "They made their choice," he said finally. "They wanted to run their own farms without human interference. Let them learn the hard way." Sandy Williams reviewed the economic reports from her new office on the human trade hub of Prosperity Station. The former production coordinator had become the director of human industrial development, overseeing manufacturing operations that were now completely independent of council economy. The reports made for interesting reading. Council industrial output had dropped by 40% in the past year. Quality control problems were plaguing manufacturing centers throughout the galaxy. Delivery schedules were constantly delayed, and production costs were skyrocketing. "The Krillian Industrial Complex is requesting technical assistance," her aide reported. "They're offering substantial payment for help with their production line." "Problems?" Sandy laughed. "Substantial payment? Where was their substantial payment when we were doing all the work for free?" The human approach to manufacturing had been revolutionary. They had introduced concepts of efficiency, quality control, and worker satisfaction that had transformed galactic industry. Production facilities that had been struggling with outdated methods suddenly became profitable and productive. But the council had seen human industrial expertise as a convenient service, not as valuable knowledge that deserved compensation. They had been happy to implement human improvements without paying for human training or education. They had assumed that the improvements would continue working forever without ongoing support. "Ma'am," the aide continued, "we're also receiving requests from 17 other industrial centers. They're all offering trade agreements in exchange for technical assistance." "Tell them we're not available," Sandy replied. "Human industrial expertise is now reserved for human allies only." 2 years after the humans vanished, Chairman Vorthik stood before the largest gathering of council members in recorded history. The great chamber was packed with representatives from every corner of the galaxy, all facing the same terrible truth: their civilization was collapsing. The massive alien leader's voice echoed through the hall as he spoke words that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. "We were wrong," he said simply. "We were wrong about humanity, and we are paying the price for our mistakes." Angry voices erupted from the assembled delegates. Some demanded military action to force the humans back. Others insisted that the council could solve their problems without human help. But most sat in stunned silence, finally understanding the magnitude of what they had lost. "The Thermal Republic has already begun secret negotiations," Vorthik continued, his voice cutting through the noise. "They are seeking to join the Human Alliance. If we do nothing, they will not be the last." Ambassador Kethmer stood up from his seat in the front row. The blue-skinned Altarian had spent 2 years searching for the missing humans, and what he had found had changed his entire understanding of galactic politics. "I have news from the Outer Rim," he announced. "The humans are not hiding. They are thriving. They have built a civilization that makes our own look primitive and backward." He activated a holographic display that showed images captured by long-range scouts. The gathered delegates gasped as they saw vast human cities floating in space. Agricultural worlds with impossible crop yields and fleets of ships using technology that the council had never seen. "How is this possible?" demanded the Krillian representative. "They were just one species among many. How could they build all of this in just 2 years?" "Because they were never just one species," Kethmore replied. "While we thought they were working for us, they were actually building something better. Something that other species want to join." The truth was stunning in its simplicity. The humans had never seen themselves as servants of the council. They had seen themselves as partners in a great galactic community. When the council refused to treat them as equals, they had quietly built their own community instead. "The Zarian Collective submitted their application yesterday," Vorthik announced, causing another wave of shocked murmurs. "One of our oldest and most powerful members wants to leave us for the humans." The Zarians were energy beings who controlled vast networks of power stations throughout the galaxy. They were ancient, wise, and had been founding members of the Council. If they were willing to abandon the Council for humanity, then the situation was even worse than most delegates realized. Dr. Lisa Warren read the Council's latest communication. Request from her laboratory on the research world of new discovery. The message was the same as all the others: urgent requests for medical assistance, offers of compensation, and veiled threats about the consequences of refusing to help. She deleted the message without responding, just as she had deleted hundreds of similar requests over the past 2 years. The Council Medical Authority was facing the worst health crisis in galactic history, and they were begging for the knowledge that they had once treated as unimportant. "Dr. Warren," her assistant called from the next room. "The Altarian medical delegation has arrived. They're requesting a formal meeting," Lisa sighed. The Altarians were the third council species to send direct representatives to human space in the past month. They were coming not as conquerors or negotiators, but as supplicants seeking help from the civilization they had once looked down upon. "Show them to conference room 3, she said. "But make sure they understand the terms. We provide assistance only to members of the Human Alliance. They can apply for membership if they're serious about cooperation." The meeting was unlike any diplomatic encounter from the old council days. The Altarian delegates sat quietly while Lisa explained the Human Alliance's medical philosophy, shared knowledge, equal access, and cooperative research. There were no demands for subordination, no complex hierarchies, just mutual respect between equal partners. "We would like to apply for associate membership," the lead Altarian delegate said quietly. "Our people are dying, and we understand now that we need more than just human technology. We need human wisdom." Meanwhile, on the military command station, orbiting New Sparta, Admiral Beth Collins monitored the growing chaos in Council space. The former human liaison to the Council fleet now commanded the defense forces of the Human Alliance, and she was watching her old colleagues struggle with problems that human expertise could solve in minutes. "The Council fleet is having another training disaster," reported her tactical officer, Commander Tony Baker. 3 ships collided during formation practice. "No casualties, but their combat effectiveness is dropping every day." Beth shook her head sadly. The alien officers were brave and dedicated, but they had never learned to think strategically. They could follow orders and execute predetermined tactics, but they couldn't adapt to changing situations or develop new solutions to unexpected problems. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a priority message from Admiral Zexther of the Council Fleet. He's requesting immediate assistance with a pirate raid on the Meridian trade route." Beth looked at the tactical display. A large pirate force was attacking merchant ships in Council space, and the local patrol fleet was badly outgunned. The Council ships were using outdated tactics that made them easy targets for the more flexible pirate vessels. "Not our space, not our responsibility," she said firmly. "Send him our standard response. The Human Alliance provides military assistance only to member worlds." But even as she spoke, Beth felt a twinge of regret. Good people were going to die because their leaders had been too proud to treat humanity as equals. The pirates would win this fight, not because they were better warriors, but because the Council had forgotten how to fight effectively. On the trading station of Liberty Point, President Lavra Scott met with the largest diplomatic delegation in human history. Representatives from 43 different species had traveled to human space, all seeking the same thing: a chance to join the civilization that the Council had dismissed as unimportant. "The Vorthan Mining Guild wishes to establish formal ties," announced their representative, a massive stone-like being who had once barely acknowledged human existence. "We offer our complete mining operations in exchange for technical assistance and alliance membership." Lavra nodded politely. The Vorthans were the fifth major council member to seek alliance membership in the past month. Their mining expertise would be valuable, but more importantly, their defection would cripple the Council's ability to extract the raw materials needed for basic infrastructure. "We welcome all species who believe in equality and cooperation," Lavra replied. "But membership in the Human Alliance requires more than just mutual benefit. It requires a commitment to treating all members as equals, regardless of their species or history." The assembled delegates nodded eagerly. After 2 years of watching their civilization crumble without human expertise, they were ready to embrace concepts that they had once rejected as naive human idealism. "What about Earth?" asked the thermal representative. "Will the human homeworld join the Alliance?" Lavra smiled. "Earth has chosen to remain independent for now, but they have indicated that they will recognize any agreements we make with former council members." The message was clear. Earth was giving its blessing to the colonial humans' new civilization. The homeworld that had once seemed so eager to join the galactic community was now content to watch that community tear itself apart. Meanwhile, in the empty council chambers, Chairman Vorthik sat alone reading reports from across the galaxy. Member species were leaving daily, either to join the Human Alliance or to form their own independent governments. The great galactic civilization that had existed for thousands of years was dissolving before his eyes. A single message waited. In his personal files, timed to be delivered exactly 2 years after the human departure. He opened it with trembling fingers and read the simple text: "We came seeking partnership and equality. We found neither. We leave you to consider what you have lost and what you might have gained. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us, but only if we choose to share it as equals. The Human Alliance stands ready to welcome any species that believes in cooperation over domination." The government of humanity, Vorthik stared at the message for a long time. The humans had never wanted to destroy the Council. They had simply wanted to be treated with respect. When respect was denied, they had built their own civilization based on the principles the Council had rejected. Now the galaxy faced a choice. The old hierarchy was crumbling, and species throughout the galaxy were choosing the human model of equality over the Council's tradition of rigid rank. Some worlds would cling to the old ways and face isolation and decline. Others would embrace change and join the growing alliance of equals. The humans had left in silence, but their departure spoke louder than any words. They had proven that cooperation was stronger than domination, that respect was more powerful than force, and that the future belonged to those willing to treat others as equals. The galaxy would never be the same again.